So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Heritage Hour. I am Benjamin Monstred, Curatorial Associate and Educator here at MOCA. Well, today's Heritage Hour, Sacred Manifestations and Ethnographic Memory in Goa. We have Dr. Sebanti Chatterjee, who is our resource person for today. Dr. Sebanti Chatterjee is an assistant professor of liberal arts at SRM University, Andhra Pradesh. Her research interests are cultural anthropology, gender studies, and the sociology of religion. In her recently released monograph titled Choral Voices, Ethnographic Imaginations of Sound and Sacrality by Bloomsbury Academic 2023, Dr. Chatterjee discusses through her own ethnographic immersion a public imagination of the sacred world, using biographical sketches of select seminarians and through her own participation in choral music training and performance. She brings forth questions of belonging, genre, and preservation of heritage in the Goan Catholic life work. So, welcome, Dr. Sebanti. But before we start, certain house rules. I request all our participants to kindly mute your mics. It's up to you whether you want to keep your video on. All your queries, questions, feedback, kindly drop them in the chat box and we will take it at the end of the session. Today's session will be moderated by our curator, Mrs. Natasha Fernandez. Over to you, Sebanti.
Okay, thank you so much, Benjamin, and thank you, Natasha, for allowing me or giving me the opportunity to do this. It's important for me because part of my book, which is based out of my research method, which is ethnography, is in Goa as well as in Meghalaya, in Shillong. So I focus on two field sites as a part of my research. Now, before I get into what I have promised to talk about in today's talk, it's important for me to talk a little bit about what exactly is ethnography, because that's a methodology that we use in sociology and anthropology to sort of understand or gauge a life world of another culture, of another community. Now, eventually, when anthropology was in much earlier in the early, say, 1950s, 1960s, and even earlier than that, it was more interested in studying a culture from and Occidental gaze, sort of, like looking at the Orient and looking at how the natives are different or how the civilizations and the cultures are different. Anthropology has undergone a lot of changes since then, and now we also study our own cultures. Like we are all doing we are using ethnography to study something which is located in India. So that is one thing. And even discipline wise, ethnomusicology, anthropology, and sociology, they all use this sort of research method to immerse themselves within the field that they are studying. One of the ways of doing ethnography is to do participant observation. Now, what is participant observation? Usually, that entails someone to whatever we are studying. In my case, I was studying the imagination of what is a choral musical tradition. So, there were two ways I could think about doing it. And because I am not from the Christian faith, because I am from another religion, so it was not possible for me to say be part of or do an ethnography of a church per se, because I wouldn't be a member of a church or a parish. So in my case, the other way was to look at what is, and anyway, my idea was to look at study the community through the lens of sound, and which is something I use as well. That how do I use the lens of sound both theoretically as well as empirically, which means how do I spell it out to understand. the different musical or vocalic practices of uh, the Goan Catholics, for instance, in today's talk. Now, I have kept the cover page of my book here, which has been illustrated by Raisa Vaz. And Raisa has been, she sang with me in the first 2014 Month Festival when we both sang with the Goa University Choir. She was a art student at that point of time, and I had told her that, you know, if I ever manage to write something about these field work in future, would you draw a map for me? And that was one of our conversations that happened in 2014. And then I remember during 2020, during lockdown, we had been speaking again for different location, purposes and everything, and she had agreed to do this. So this is not a map of Goa, and I'm assuming that a lot of you are from Goa, so you would know that this is something uh, how I navigated the field. In the sense, a lot of these images are from Panjim, where I stayed. There's Pelican Apartments in Altin, which is back of the beyond. Then there is also there was this hostel I stayed in near Fontainebleau that is there. Then there's the Holy Church of Madgaon. Then there is the Archbishop's Palace. There is the Goa University, the place where we had taken the photo of the choir. And then you have the old Goa ruins. You also have the Rush Hall Seminary. And so now the thing is, and she had added this laptop and camera and all of that, and buses mainly because I didn't know how to ride a scooty and I had to rely on buses to move from one point to the other. Now, that's how I sort of, let's just say, I put myself in the field. And despite coming from a different social location, being an upper caste Hindu person, trying to be part of a choir, I also would be talking about my experiences singing with the Goa University Choir. So, I mean, I'm also sorry that we've lost Santiago, who was our conductor due to COVID. And so a lot has changed since from the time I had begun this work and today. But I'm happy that at least I was able to document some of this in some ways. Now, uh, is it moving? Yeah, okay. So, so to situate the research, of course, now Goa was under the Portuguese government sovereignty until 1961. Then it acquired its statehood in 1987. It is located on the western coast in India and is one of the smallest states in the country. And one of the important ways to understand how, say, a cultural influence happened was due to the parochial schools since 16th century, how they sort of infused a sensorium within Goa about reading, writing, arithmetic, as well as music. And later on we see that even with the advent of the British colonial tendencies, when that seminary or Rashal seminary held on to this tradition of infusing singing traditions or musical practices within alongside theological training. And so also it is important to know that why I chose certain vignettes to talk about the soundscape that is evolving in Goa. So one of the things is that, of course, I do talk about choirs, and singing with Goa University Choir is a small fragment of my experience. But I have also looked at other choirs in Meghalaya, which I would not be talking about today. But in case of Goa, I realized that it is also important to look at the site of musical foundation, or what is the way, or how is this Goan sacred music repertoire emerging? and where can we start with. So that is how I decided to speak to some of the seminarians who studied at Rashal Seminary. Many of them went on and became priests and even started their own choirs, uh, maintaining both responsibilities. And some of them probably didn't, go on to this vocation of becoming a priest, but kept held on to music in their own ways, and which is why it becomes important to the seminary in Goa. So I like the questions that are there, and even while reading out, even Benjamin mentioned. So now I would be interested in what is sacred, what is nostalgia, what is the meaning of sound that is emerging in Goa, and just because it's a Christian musical tradition, it has a colonial flavor to it. Does it mean that whenever we are talking about this new idea of we want to decolonize everything, what exactly do we mean by it? And what does it mean? What is indigenous to us? What is vernacularization? What is localization? And in the domain of music, how do we sort of address these kind of questions? So now one thing is important is to understand what Susanna Sardo talks about, the way in which Lusosonia, she talks about how Portuguese sounds have sort of been acquired as a process of cultural initiation and cultural appreciation, and then also sort of importing of these culture within the various uh, Portuguese speaking colonies who were former colonies. And then when we are talking about a certain kind of a past, that past is part of that culture. So when we are talking about indigeneity, it would also have these kind of remnants which are from Portuguese. So this becomes important. And then to address the question of, say, what is sacralization of heritage. Now, for that, it is important that we choose to look at certain emblems, certain points that we want to portray as symptomatic of a certain culture, and how do we then preserve it? One of the ways which I've seen in Goa, one of the ways it is doing so is through various kinds of festivals, be it in the domain of folklore, be it in the domain of Christian music, or other kinds of new manifestations that we are seeing. So, for instance, these kind of sacred festivals, like the Mont Festival in Goa at the Capella de Mont, or the festival that was started by Santiago Lusardi in 2016, the Kitevan Festival, the World Religious Music Festival, are some of these examples. And I have sung as a part of my participant observation, where I auditioned and I got through the mezzo soprano voice within the choir. I sang with the choir on 3 occasions. Once during Month and twice during Kitevan Festival during the year 2014 and 2016. And so then that is there. And today you see also something like Madra Goa, where which is sort of having some rejuvenating how to look at Fado and Mando in contemporary imagination. So we see that there is always it is always moving, and it is going back and forth. And that is one important thing about understanding a culture, that it 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 chooses to remember and recollect and then curate a certain idea of what they would be considering, say, to be be representative of their certain musical tradition. And that is what we see happening even as I go back to the seminary kind of understanding of Goan sacred music. I will read out, a couple of anecdotes, where that sort of will give you a clue about why music was important for some of the seminarians. So I spoke to Father Eufemio Miranda, who sort of founded the Stuti Choir in 2008, and Stuti Choir has had several choral conductors, and right now Parvesh Java is the present conductor. And but he talks about how he got interested in music, how he got interested in theology, and that sort of gives you a sense of maybe some of the entry points as to why music is so strong, or why sacrality informs a musicality within to understand the Goan sacred repertoire. So I quote, I was born in a family where my father was a teacher of Portuguese. He loved language, poetry, and music. My mother also loved music. She learnt the piano. They used to sing to us some of the melody lines by Chopin and Mozart. So in our family, there was always some kind of poetry, music, and atmosphere of great joy. I went to the seminary to become a priest, and in those times, it was compulsory to learn Latin. And because of my Portuguese background, I was an extremely good student of Latin. I got over distinction in Latin, and that gave me a great enthusiasm to pursue all my academic studies in the languages. In seminary, we had to study a lot of languages. First was Portuguese and Latin. Next year, it was Portuguese, French, and Latin. Then we had to learn Konkani, Marathi, and things like that. All these languages I excelled in, and I loved poetry also, because poetry too has music. In seminary, music was also a part of the curriculum. Music was a compulsory subject. Everybody had to learn music, even those people who did not have an ear for music. Those who were out of tune in singing, even those people had to learn music. And in the seminary of Saligao, which is the minor seminary, where I spent my secondary education, there were many opportunities to perform music. I also learnt the violin later on when I went to the major seminary in Rochelle. There were studies on philosophy and theology. Rochelle Seminary had a choir, and I was an effective member of the choir. The choir was always directed by the teacher of music. He was always a priest, and he took me as his assistant. In his absence, I had to coordinate all the work of the choir. So music was very much a part of my priestly formation. I was in Rochelle Seminary between the years 1960 to 67. I became a priest in 1967. So he recalls with great joy how music was so important in even his vocation as a priest, and how poetry and music and different kinds of languages that sort of inclined him to pursue a certain kind of artistic orientation in his approach to life, apart from his devotional duties. So we can see that how the seminary has been fundamental in sort of shaping these kind of individuals and ideas. Now, I will just use another quote from another another seminarian, Miguel Cota, who went to the seminary, but he did not become a priest for different personal reasons. However, he had started his own family choir, which has now been disbanded. But during the time when I was doing my field work, it was till 2017, they were still singing. So I'll just read out a little bit of what he narrated to me. In 1992, we started our own family choir. At that time, my kids were teenagers. It was a permanent paid job for us during that time. We performed at Leela Hotel 6 days a week. The common songs were mostly from the category of dulcotes, old Portuguese, Spanish, Italian songs, and light songs like pop. We sing in three voices: tenor, soprano, and alto. Three notes are enough to hold the harmony. Of course, bass gives a better effect. We used to sing for 3 hours, 7:30 to 10:30, 6 days a week for 3 years. We are the only choral group in Goa. In other places, we mostly have bands. During the years 97 to 98, there were no performances in hotels. We used to sing common wedding and funeral songs from songbooks that were available. Uh, Now, in another instance, his son Schubert Cotta had told that as a family choir, we do only one genre of music. What I mean is that the clients are different and we change the music accordingly. But we don't do fusions. We do Portuguese popular and folk songs, regional songs from North and South Goa, Goan folk music. When I'm singing and performing with my family, we do pop and semi-classical. We've performed in Denmark, Macau, Bangalore, Calcutta, and Delhi. Initially, public performance was more relaxed, then it became part of the system. Today, the appreciation for live music is going. While doing wedding songs, also, the couples are hard to satisfy. We try to oblige with their requests. Sometimes we have no audience. There isn't much future to this family choir. It is taking another kind of course. The opportunity came along, and we are a choir. The family choir stays together. We speak Portuguese at home. As a musician, I would say we are informal and flexible, and we like experimentation. So we see that even within the different kinds of formats and the different kinds of genres that each choir is trying to bring in. And this is something in my book I call, in different contexts, this is how I say, identify what is cosmopolitanism. So what is cosmopolitanism in Goa would be different in case of Shillong, as we clearly see as an example of how doing, popular folk songs or some pop music in restaurant settings was one way of, and within the harmonic arrangement was one way in which we can see a cosmopolitan idea of a choir within Goa. Now, now then, where am I going with this? With this idea of a vernacular cosmopolitan, and then what is eventually indigenous? Now, Svetlana Boym, and in her book, when she when the author is talking about what went on in Soviet Revolution, it talks about a concept called restorative nostalgia, which is very integral to understand in terms of curation of this kind of, say, um, the Goan sacred repertoire that I try to understand in this book, which is that, especially I look at the seminary and I look at the Goan dissection of sacred music, determining the parameters of what qualifies to be a sacred music and what does not, because there are these rules around it. So then that means that they are curating what they would want to be part of their cultural heritage, memory, and they would select which mando or which dulpod, or mandos mostly are still taken, and they are adapted for church sacred purposes as well in some cases. Then we also see different kinds of manifestation, like, say, the Aradhan choir, which does both sacred and non-sacred kind of music, and they have a choir, and I will be playing some of the songs as I go on, and towards the end we'll listen to it. And so what I'm trying to say is that when they, for instance, in 2018, they had done a song, which I will be playing, Mari Matok Balok Zala, which is celebrating uh, Mother Nature and Mother Mary, and and birth of Jesus and all of that. Uh, what becomes important is then also what is to be performed within the church or outside the church. These kind of questions also become important. In another instance, for example, Father Miranda had told that he feels that Bach's music or like a Brandenburg concerto would be much, which is elevating to the soul. It should also be allowed within the church premises. How is it different from the sacred music if it's elevating and it's high music in that sense? But because of certain ideas of what adheres to the meter, rhythm, and say lyrics of sacred repertoire, certain even just classical music would not be allowed. The kind of decisions, and these are the kind of ways in which we see sacred music emerging. There's also these motets during the Lent season that have been composed by certain Goans that are also sung only during these festivals, and those are also safeguarded and during certain moments. So we see that how certain kinds of music are being arranged and collected within the perspective of, say, Goan sacred music. And then Goan sacred music or choral music, what happens when someone else comes, and someone else with a different flavor of doing music, when they come, for example, Santiago, he was an Italian Argentinian composer who was based in Spain. He came and as a part of a Goa University program, which was also an appreciation of Western classical music, as well as this setting up the Goa University Choir. Then what I'm saying is then there is also a signature style of music making that comes with who is making music with you or who is designing the choir. So this is something I mean, in course of my writing, I borrow from Ruma Chatterjee and then Muriel Swigbhushan, who talks about communal individuality, and Ruma Chatterjee talks about signature, regional signatures, which both of them, rather just to keep it the context of what we are trying to understand, is how are we bringing in new ideas which may not be part of the local sensorium, but how are we then interspersing it with what is going on within? So then in devising our music, we had the vision of, say, the Ketevan festival was a syncretic musical culture. So we sang songs of requiem and war and those kind of things, and also try to bring in different kinds of musical practices in terms of instruments. And Carl Jenkins was one of the composers, so he also had in his songs there was opportunity to bring in Indian musical instruments as well. So we see that, and communal individuality is also about that is Swigvision talks about it in a Australian context of doing choral music with aborigines, and how it is different, or in the sense, what is the vocalization, what is the intonation, or black or Grant Olwage talks about how amongst the blacks there is a kind of timbral habitus, which is that we are used to having a certain kind of tonal format in singing. And this whole idea extends to both Goa and Shillong. I'm not talking only about how in Goa the voices are being trained. What I'm saying is that there are certain ways in which we have adapted and we have curated our idea of what is sacred music, and then we get new ideas which are coming from different types of singing, different disciplines of orienting ourselves, and then how do they merge, and how do the sounds then spell out a different kind of sacrality, and also a certain kind of performativity. So these are largely the ideas. This is from Ketevan Festival 2016. in St. Augustine ruins. I remember we had sung a song, and we were so used to singing without microphones that we realized that when suddenly on the opening day we were asked to sing with microphones, and I was suddenly, somehow, because of the arrangement, I was put somewhere in the beginning. I had to really stay away so that I don't my voice doesn't come that way, because we were so used to our positions and everything otherwise, and singing within the church acoustics, that this was new. And that's how we realize what is a rehearsal voice, what is what is a performance voice, or what is a microphone voice, for that matter. You need to modulate your voice while singing, while you are sort of rendering a certain kind of sentiment, certain kind of feelingfulness. So these are also the kind of things that I learned while I was singing myself as a part of the choir. So, yeah. How am I doing with time?
Yeah,
Yes.
Siddhant, you have another 15 minutes. We can take up the questions also with,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'll listen to the songs. This is one of our oldest photos from the 2014. Yeah, the first Goa University choir members were there. I mean, yeah, Santiago was there as well. So of course. Then 1 second. So this is the song that I was talking about. There are 3 songs that I will be playing, little bit, and then with that I will end my talk. I'll just play these 3 songs, and then I'll say something. 1 second. Sharing the screen. So, so the idea was to leave you with the songs to just to give you the idea of how my fieldwork went and what were the places where I went, either doing my participant observation or non-participant observation. I also went and attended Stuti choral ensemble rehearsals, especially during 2014-15, not so much during 2016. But then, so there has been, parts of fieldwork when I had done certain ways and doing things. So, yes, I mean, I that's what I'll now listen to what you have to say, or yeah.
Thank you, Sebanti. It has really been a great presentation of all the fieldwork and your explanations about uh, the different elements of these choral voices that we usually perform in churches, church spaces. I would I think we already have one question, but if there are other comments or questions from our participants, please put them in the chat box and we'll start taking them up. There's a question from Dr. Sharmila Pais, who asks you if you have been able to investigate into the origins of sacred music in Goa, and if so, what are your sources?
Thank you for the question. So, like, my work has not been really archival research, it has been ethnographic. So, yes, I haven't gone so much into the origin of the music, but origin would be Gregorian chants were also sung, as we read from secondary literature, also in seminary traditions, and how that's one the colloquio de music also talks about these kind of musical practices. But the other thing is, like I said, parochial schools and the seminary tradition kept alive this. And also, there were these, like I also came across Krista Purana, I was told about this while I was doing this Ketevan festival actually presentation. We were trying to come up with this paper, and I met a priest who had said that in one of the churches in Goa, they are also trying to, bring back or revive traditions of Krista Purana, which was the Marathi translation of Christianity and biblical themes. So I don't know if there is one original source. There is, of course. Um, we know that how it has been through a certain kind of cultural sensitization or an immersion into a different kind of Portuguese fabric of sound world. That's how it has come. And but like I said, because of this whole idea of restorative nostalgia, there has been a certain way in which certain sounds have been curated to be part of Goan sacred music as we see amongst the Catholics in Goa. At least during my field work, that is the kind of immersion that I was led to observe. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, for now.
Yeah, like you said, it's your research has been mostly based on ethnographic sources rather than archival sources. So yes, I think Dr. Sharmila, maybe I hope she's answered your question. Uh, Hari says thank you for a wonderful talk and sweet stories.
Yes,
Snehal also says lovely presentation. There is a question from Anna Zacharias. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk, Dr. Chatterjee. Your research also brought to mind works on Cochin Jews from Kerala who also invoke elements of nostalgia through their folk songs sung by their women. Okay, thank you, Anna, for your comment there. And Snehal has a question. Does the Mando still take place at the houses of the elite in Goa and also Portuguese Fado apart from events at SIPA?
So I
Uh,
think, yeah, this I would. So one thing about Mandos is that there is this Mando festivals that still happens, that has started, and Mandos, like I said, even in Madra Goa, they are singing now Mandos and Fados. There are different manifestations of how it was originally. I wouldn't know that it is only happening because that is not again my area of research as to look at Mandos per se. But Ruth Lobo has a documentary of on Mandos and which talks about the OVs and the kind of songs and all of that. But yeah, it doesn't touch on the elite performance at the elite houses only. And I think that now even this actually is my new research is going to be about around gumot and gumot makers, and I want to work on the social life of gumot as an instrument, and what are its why it's allowed within sacred and non-sacred spaces. So I guess when I embark on that, I will have more insight into.
Yeah, just to answer, just to answer a little more of what Snehal has asked. Of course, Snehal, yes, besides Madhura Goa, there's also Sounds from Goa, which is led by Omar, and Nadia sings with them. They sing at Omar's house in Benauli, and they perform at some other spaces as well. So the performances are increasing in houses around Goa. So there are more house performances that are coming up where people can also go and attend such performances. So Snehal, do come to Goa and be part of the performance at some point. I have a question, Sebanti, for you. In your experience of having performed with the Goa University Choir uh, in a church space and without a microphone versus in an open air setup, I know you mentioned, you had to step back from your microphone in that Augustine Ruin complex, which was an open air space. Can you share with us a little more? And if you had to listen to a microphone performance in a church space, what would be your feelings about it? If you've heard in the past as well, performances with microphones. I'm not talking about the day-to-day choir singing in churches where there are smaller groups singing, but a larger performance with or without a microphone. What do you have to say about these church spaces which are and their acoustics?
So yeah, thank you for the question. I do talk about it, but yeah, one thing is that in Meghalaya, for instance, they use in church also they use microphones. Even Maukhar Presbyterian Church, or because the acoustics or the architectural space is not built in that manner. But however, you also have certain churches with those modern kind of microphone embedded in the church, where you don't have mics, but you have that's there in some Presbyterian and Baptist churches in Mizoram, and that I have seen elsewhere, not in Goa, but I'm talking about because I have also looked at these other spaces. Then also I have not recorded with the Goa University Choir, because the Goa University Choir has also recorded their songs. That's available, and some of it is of course available on YouTube as well. But they did some recording. So when you are in a recording studio, the way you would sing, it would be very different in terms of projecting your voice, in terms of trying to bring in sort of balance out the sounds and all of that. So these are the kind of things that we also learn also within, like when you are standing in a position where you have to know when to sort of blend in and fade out with the choir, because the choir is a sound of the collective, and not one person standing out or showcasing. So that way I feel these are the kind of differences when we are using the microphone or when we are not using the microphone. Yeah, that's what I would like to say. Yeah.
And there, I think, is a question also from Gunjan, who has asked whether you found any similarities between choral music in Goa and in Meghalaya.
Yeah. So the thing is that I did not do a comparative study, and in my work I also say that how the different kinds of regional variation and the different kind of colonial experiences sort of chart out different Christian musical singing and tradition. And while in Goa I found this propensity to adhere to a template of nostalgia, in case of Shillong and Meghalaya, it was more about adopting the idea of innovation. So that would be my larger sort of differences and when I say innovation, they would want to bring church music in conjunction with sacred music, hymns, in conjunction with say Bollywood or in say with jazz. It's not like medley is not happening in Goa, but there the idea of medley as a genre, which I also talk about in my book, emerges as a very telling social phenomena about the choral music scene. Whereas in Goa, I see that there is a way in which you are trying to reconstruct and reimagine a kind of traditional music, but in keeping with modern times. So I would say that is how I see the differences or similarities.
Okay. Sharmila also
Exactly.
has
Okay.
another, yeah. Sharmila has another question, not a question, but
That's
an observation. Yes, of course, on the Mando
yeah.
performances, which are done, of course, even during our weddings, Christian or
Yeah.
Catholic weddings, and not popular. Yes, it is. You do see some of our weddings receptions have Mando performances during elite gatherings as well. Yeah, when families get together and are all together are and there's a gumot around, definitely you will have Mandos. And I think Dr. Sharmila, the college that you are teaching in, is a great source of inspiration because they've always encouraged Mando singing and participating in Mando festivals. So such an amazing thing because for the youngsters to connect with that genre of music, what a beautiful way that happens at St. Xavier's College. That is my comment because that's been my experience at the college. So bravo to all those who encourage this genre of music. Uh, is there any other? Okay,
I
yes,
have a question. I just
okay,
want
that's
to know,
Benjamin.
Dr. Sebanti, is that in particular for your book, you have chosen Goa and Meghalaya as your area of study. Is there any particular reason for choosing these two states rather than any other state of India?
Okay. No, not really. The thing is that one of the reasons this is a story I didn't begin with, but I have been working on understanding different musical traditions, be it in terms of teaching of Western classical music or what is the framework of pedagogy of Western music in Goa for a while. I have been doing that kind of research during my master's in MPhil, which was to do with music pedagogy. The reason why Shillong came into the picture was also to understand after the win of the reality TV show. I wanted to know why, because with that choral rendition, suddenly Meghalaya and Shillong became on the map. And if you can see the reason, like in the sense, usually studies from Northeast are heavily based on militarization and conflict and violence, which is, of course, one of the ways in which we see the region and struggling through every day. But the there is also this music which is part of the everyday. So there is a way through which you can understand the community through the lens of sound. Even in terms of Goa, the like in a popular imagination, it's a favorite tourist destination or something like, you are going there or you know about the old Bollywood arrangements by Goan arrangers. But there is a consistent flow and rhythm of music which is part of the community per se. So that is why I said sound becomes a lens to theoretically and empirically understand through two communities who are steeped in different Christian denominations. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I'll just adding to that. Um, in other states also, I suppose that there are the full aspect of choral that is rising in Bombay, you have in Calcutta, and you have in Delhi. So is that something that you wish to explore further in the future?
So the thing is that I am always interested in exploring different kinds of choral traditions, and recently I've been working on a film with IFA grant, which is to do with choral music scene in Meghalaya and Mizoram, and how sort of art and labor coexist in mapping choral space. So yes, even Nagaland has, even Bombay has, Delhi has, but it is just that I'm interested also to look at the other aspects. So I would also be interested in looking at, say, music and ecology, which is why I'm interested in Gumot, how now it has now been using goat skin instead of monitor lizard as a membranophone. And then what happens to the sound of the instrument? What is happening to the aesthetics of the beating of the I mean, Gumot then? And then how is it now going into a state cultural heritage? It is a state cultural heritage instrument now, but what happens if it becomes a part of intangible cultural heritage as well? So those are the kind of questions that I also want to delve into. I think Professor Susanna Sardo is also working on similar, but from a different standpoint question. So we have also been talking about it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sebanti. Do you have any other questions, ma'am?
No. Thank you, Sebanti.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you for your patience. And thank you, Natasha, and
Thank
thank you, Benjamin. Bye
Thank
bye.
you, Dr. Sebanti. It was a really amazing session, actually, because these soundscapes form part of our daily life experiences. So getting to hear this from you and from a different perspective really, broadens our perspective also. And thank you to all the participants for joining in our today's Heritage Hour. And if you wish to know more about all our events that happen here at MOCA, kindly do follow us on Instagram. And if you're part of a WhatsApp group that is events at MOCA, you will get updates of the various sessions and workshops we have at MOCA. So once again, thank you to everyone, and thank you, Dr. Siddharthi.